The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of October 12, 2025, the podcast that drips on down in a mist from above. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's tabulate the news of the bogus. So we'll begin with more fears about AI and data centers, and specifically how data centers are having to burn more coal to meet their power needs. According to financial services firm Jefferies, the unexpected increase in demand for new capacity will increase over the next 3 years. Quote, "We raise our estimate for coal generation by 11%, driven by higher capacity factors and staying elevated through 2027 on favorable fuel pricing versus gas, particularly for existing fleet." Power companies all over the country are reporting having to burn more coal to meet increased demand, and environmentalists, of course, worry about the pollution and CO2 that comes from these plants. The problem, of course, isn't AI at all. It's the lack of nuclear power. Not just ones that were shut down, but ones that would and should have been built, but weren't entirely for political reasons. Last year, Morgan Stanley projected that power generation for data centers will emit 2.5 billion tons of greenhouse gases by 2030, 3 times previous estimates. Someone please compare that to the nuclear power plants that have been shut down by idiots. As we covered before, data centers are trying their best. Amazon is working with TerraPower to build their Natrium reactor as cheap, safe, clean energy for an AWS data center. And Microsoft is working with Constellation Energy Generation to restart the TMI-2 reactor in 2 years. But if political idiots had never put the brakes on it, if the NRC had never existed, or at least had been anything but a bunch of panicky obstructionists, we would be absolutely swimming in clean power. No one would care about climate change, electric cars would be uninhibited, and people of all socioeconomic classes would be immeasurably better off than they are now. With every new power concern, we need to be reminded as to why it's a concern, and more importantly, who's to blame for it and whom we should never listen to again.
Presenting the greatest game this side of Yugoth. You are H.P. Lovecraft's cat, and your name is Nick. Right, we can't say that on a podcast. Well, anyway, that's the point. Your name is a joke to him. So now, you are out for revenge. Using the Necronomicon, you come to the present day to buy a gun to go vanquish him once and for all. But the Necronomicon is devious, and it summoned Lovecraft's monsters as well. Now, in a crumbling world, you must fight for the revenge you seek. Fight monsters, gain allies, buy guns and armor for yourself and your team. Defeat the bosses of each level. Then get your revenge against Lovecraft himself. Play Lovecraft's Cat. The link is at cat.bogosity.tv. Yeah, we're doing cat.bogosity.tv, not that other one. What, you want me to get kicked off the internet or something?
Okay, now that I've got you all whipped up, let me tell you why it's not as great a concern as all that. Andy Masley has a pretty lengthy Substack article where he actually looks at data center usage for AI, specifically ChatGPT, in something other than a total vacuum, and actually puts it into context with many other uses. He also engages the concept of opportunity costs to consider what you would otherwise be doing if you weren't using ChatGPT. He starts off being very direct, quote, "The question this post is trying to answer is, should I boycott ChatGPT? Or limit how much I use it for the sake of the climate? And the answer is a resounding and conclusive no. The numbers are completely clear and final, and anyone telling you otherwise is deeply mistaken. All counterpoints fail for simple, obvious reasons. Now, regular listeners know this podcast and how we're immediately on alert when people talk like that. Make a claim like that, and you'd better be able to back it up. But, spoiler alert, he does. Now, he's just talking about climate issues and power usage among data centers, not other issues like copyright or job losses, but we've already debunked those pretty thoroughly. I'll leave you to read a lot of the details for yourself. The article is so long there's no way we can even summarize most of it. So just hitting the highlights, let's start a ways down where he talks about energy and water usage. Quote, a ChatGPT prompt uses 0.3 watt-hours. This is enough energy to leave a single incandescent light bulb on for 18 seconds, leave a wireless router on for 3 minutes, play a gaming console for 6 seconds, run a vacuum cleaner for 1 second, run a microwave for 1 second, run a toaster for 0.8 seconds, or brew coffee for 10 seconds. He also mentions that at DC prices, it costs about 1/200th of a cent. To use $1 worth of power, you'd have to make 19,600 prompts. As for carbon usage, a single ChatGPT prompt produces 0.28 grams of CO2, or about 35 seconds of streaming video, uploading 9 images, driving a sedan for 4 feet, or using a laptop for 1 minute. Quote, because this is so low, encouraging people to stop using ChatGPT is basically never going to have any impact on their individual emissions. If individual emissions are what you're worried about, ChatGPT is hopeless as a way of lowering them. It's like seeing people who are spending too much money and saying they should buy 1 fewer gumball per month. What I couldn't figure is his assumptions about this amount of CO2 production. He seems to be using a mix of power sources probably close to the U.S. average. Obviously, if you live in an area with a lot of nuclear, hydro, and solar, those emissions are going to be a lot lower. But you all know how much I love visual perspectives. He mentions the average American emits about 100,000 times as much CO2 per day, and then shows you an image with 100,000 dots. Quote, if I started spending an additional penny per month, I wouldn't notice, because there would be other days where I'd randomly spend way more or fewer pennies on other things. If I looked at a graph of my spending, the penny would be drowned out in the random noise of my other decisions. ChatGPT prompts are like this. They use so little energy that they get drowned out in the random ways we change our energy use day to day. If you looked at a graph of my energy footprint before and after using ChatGPT, you wouldn't notice any change at all. And then there's the claim we've covered before about water usage. More dots! 1 dot is water used by 1 ChatGPT prompt, whereas the whole thing is your daily water use. Every day, the average American uses enough water for 24,000 to 61,000 ChatGPT prompts. Quote, if you want to prompt ChatGPT 40 times, you can just stop your shower 1 second early. If you normally take a 5-minute shower, set a timer for 299 seconds instead, and you'll have saved enough water to justify 40 ChatGPT prompts. He also shows a graph of other internet usage compared to ChatGPT and how it is absolutely dwarfed by an e-commerce purchase, 1 hour of streaming music, 1 hour of GPS navigation, uploading a 1 gig file, a 1 hour Zoom call, or watching a 10-minute 4K video. In fact, judging by the size of the graphs, it seems closer to a minute of a Zoom call, less than 30 seconds of the video, and maybe a single song on a streaming platform. And as he points out, no one really thinks about their water usage of other products. Quote, leather shoes, 4 million prompts worth of water. Smartphone, 6.4 million prompts. Jeans, 5.4 million prompts. T-shirt, 1.3 million prompts. A single piece of paper, 2,550 prompts. A 400-page book, 1 million prompts. If you want to send 2,500 ChatGPT prompts and feel bad about it, you can simply not buy a single additional piece of paper. If you want to save a lifetime supply worth of chatbot prompts, just don't buy a single additional pair of jeans. If you want to reduce your water footprint, avoiding ChatGPT will never make a dent. These numbers are so incredibly small, it's hard to find things to compare them to. All total, American data centers use about 8% of the water used by U.S. steel production. Basically, when it comes to all of these issues, ChatGPT usage is a rounding error. But more than that, he points out how efficient data centers are precisely because they concentrate computing in a single area, which is the very thing that allows people to come up with all these scary numbers. There are very few things that can be concentrated as much as data centers can, and so they are incredibly efficient when compared to other industries whose production has to be spread out all over the place. And that's the paradox he points out. Quote, "The environmental paradox of data centers is that they put so much strain on the surrounding energy grid because, not despite the fact that they have been made so uniquely energy efficient. This is due to the economies of scale that come with running so many servers in one building. That can pose a problem for a local grid, which wasn't made for such hyper-concentrated power usage. But again, the paradox is that they do that because they are so darned efficient. Locally, they use a lot of power in a few places. Globally, they're incredibly efficient. Locally, they put out a lot of carbon compared to other places. Globally, it's incredibly low. Locally, they use a lot of water. Globally, their water usage is negligible. The average Earthling uses the internet for 7 hours a day. That entire time, you're interacting with a data center of some kind. And all data centers worldwide emit about 0.5% of the world's emissions. Another reason it looks so bad is because AI is growing so fast, and this wasn't anything that was predicted 10 or 20 years ago when we could have built out the infrastructure to deal with it. But 51% of all hyperscale AI facilities are in the U.S., and 60% of new ones will be built here, and that's supporting the AI usage of about 1 billion people worldwide. But what if we didn't have these data centers? Then we'd have to be doing everything on our own computers. That would mean power issues being spread out, with much greater overhead at residential or commercial prices, as opposed to very efficient low overhead energy uses at industrial prices. And that's without considering how AI can lower energy and emissions. The International Energy Agency said in a report, "The adoption of existing AI applications in end-use sectors could lead to 1,400 megatons of CO2 emissions reductions in 2035 in the widespread adoption case. This does not include any breakthrough discoveries that may emerge thanks to AI in the next decade." Think about it like the rise of the internet. A lot of power was and is generated to run the internet, and all the computers, servers, smartphones, routers, and everything else involved. But look at how much more efficient it's made things. AI will be the same way. And like I said in the last segment, blame the fearmongers who didn't want to build out nuclear power. For our species, this should never have been a problem.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass sensors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
The rise of censorship has all sorts of problems and all sorts of places you're not aware of that'll have massive effects on your life. It's one thing when you're not allowed to upload a meme. It's so much worse when it's about designing the next generation of internet technologies. The IETF, or Internet Engineering Task Force, is the group that determines all of the standards used all over the internet. And the NSA has been trying to corrupt and control them for decades. With their British partner GCHQ, they're working to try and weaken internet encryption, and they're throwing a lot of money at the IETF to do it. What they're wanting to do and how they're trying to do it is way beyond the scope of this podcast, but just know that the only thing standing between them and your private data is the voices of dissent at the IETF, like cryptographer Daniel J. Bernstein. He wrote a blog post on MODPOD, a new set of rules for how proposed standards can be discussed. This blog post is lengthy and highly technical, but that's what you have me for, isn't it? The IETF is divided down into working groups, the chairs of which manage the discussions. They have the power to temporarily block disruptive or abusive users, but it's loose and dissenters in discussions are protected more by social norms. MODPOD would instead create a permanent IETF-wide moderation team that can override the decisions of chairs, ban patterns of behavior, like the always vague uncivil tone, and suspend or permanently ban people across all IETF lists. The new rules could justify almost any intervention, no matter how minor, and could be used to silence dissent and sanitize controversy with basically no accountability. It's being opposed by a lot of the old-school technologists and procedural watchdogs, and if you're ever going to make a list of those people, Bernstein would be near the top. He's the creator of Elliptic Curve 25519 that protects almost everyone all over the internet, and who has been pushing back on attempts to weaken post-quantum encryption, as we've covered in the past. They complain that the existing system is bad enough as it is, since chairs basically have unilateral authority, and if anything, those should be reined in a bit. But unelected moderators operating across the whole of the IETF is very much a road too far for them. Dissent is crucial for stopping bad or compromised standards. It needs to be protected. Because there's absolutely nothing else that protects regular users like you and me. Bernstein posted to the ModPod WG, "I've already given various examples of WG chairs abusing their current powers to silent dissent, blocking threads, threatening list bans if particular objections are mentioned again, while not even pretending to meet the rules. I shouldn't have to repeat myself. The ModPod draft, if adopted as is, will make things even worse, notably by 1. Giving IETF-wide powers to a small team of censors, 2. Replacing the gray areas of the English word disruptive with a much broader list of open-ended items declared to be disruptive by fiat, even when they don't actually disrupt anything, and 3. Destroying the system of prior warnings." ModPod is in the status of Working Group Last Call, which is basically a speak now or forever hold your peace status. And that means it's now or never for dissenting voices to be heard. But as Bernstein complained in one of the threads, quote, "It's astonishing that a draft is in WG Last Call when the evidence that supposedly motivates the draft hasn't been presented publicly to the WG. The issue isn't just how terrible it looks for a rule-setting group to not be following the existing rules. One would expect some recognition that secrecy leads to errors and to abuse." Which makes it even more disturbing that the mailing list moderators are locking threads and censoring dissent. Bernstein explains, quote, "The core problem is tech companies colluding to control the market. For example, making protocols unnecessarily complicated to increase the barrier to entry for new competitors. The companies come to IETF to put a veneer of standardization on this collusion. Dissent threatens this, so they're happy when censorship powers make dissent easier to stifle. This violates the legal requirement of openness, but violating the law is simply another business calculation for these companies. The abuses aren't a surprise. The system is set up to allow the abuses, and the system has to be fixed. Unfortunately, the current MODPOD draft makes abuses even easier. And ironically, it's being done under the existing rules by the chair of the MODPOD working group. His opposition got all triggered by him using the C word, but it is censorship, as he explained. It's not doublespeak, it's singlespeak. It's not a loaded term. That's when something has an extra or hidden meaning. Censorship is the meaning. Quote, simply comparing the dictionary definition of censorship to the text of the draft shows that this draft authorizes censorship. There are many examples of censors saying that what they're doing is proper. Consider, e.g., the Office of Censorship in the 1940s, or the Central Board of Film Censors today. This doesn't make it something other than censorship. What was before just a question of etiquette has now become about power. The IETF has always embraced an open anarchy against the power of chairs to keep discussions productive. That's worked because, for the most part, chairs have the technical expertise to understand their WG and respect a culture of dissent. But MODPOD would make it a centralized authority, herding everyone into compliance. It won't need consensus anymore. You don't need consensus when you have a mute button. The internet was built and made so amazing by people who argued too much. That rough anarchy worked because it standardized everything except thought. You don't debug something by stopping the debuggers, and you don't improve the internet by turning the Wild West into a Soviet republic.
I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv.
And now it's time to pre-evaporate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And the indictment is finally dropped in the case against New York Attorney General Letitia James, and as stupid and corrupt as we thought she was, it's a lot worse than we thought. This isn't about her massively corrupt cases against Donald Trump, or her stupid and dangerous lies about nuclear power in general and the Indian Point plant in particular. No, this is about her committing exactly the same kind of financial fraud she accused Trump of. Lying about her residences to get better loan terms. Lindsay Halligan, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, announced the indictment and said, quote, "No one is above the law. The charges as alleged in this case represent intentional criminal acts and tremendous breaches of the public's trust. The facts and the law in this case are clear, and we will continue following them to ensure that justice is served." A federal grand jury indicted her on Thursday. As we covered previously, she said in loan documents in 2021 that her Virginia property was her primary residence. Then how is she able to be AG of New York? She then rented out that Virginia home, meaning that it wasn't a residence for her at all, but a rental property. That means she lied again in 2023 when she filed it as a secondary residence. Claiming it as a residence gave her better loan terms than she would have gotten if she'd listed it as a rental property. So this is a fraud on the banks. Exactly the same kind of fraud she prosecuted Trump for. She then signed a second home rider promising to live there, but then rented it out to tenants. Lenders require such a rider to make sure the property is used as intended for personal use by the borrower, rather than for investment or rental purposes. The loan documents were to a Fannie Mae-backed lender, meaning she was getting more favorable terms going through a lender with federal government backing, which has special rules and penalties. Fannie-backed loans require a higher down payment for second homes than for first, and they also include strict occupancy rules. It also elevates any fraud to a federal crime. Her false claims saved her $18,933 on her loan terms and interest payments. Now, are you ready for the really stupid part? Quote, James filed Schedule E tax forms under penalties of perjury, treating the Perone property as rental real estate, reporting fair rental days, 0 personal use days, thousands of dollars in rents received, and claiming deductions for expenses relating to the property, further contradicting the second home classification. So she was so dumb, she officially filed that she wasn't renting the property, then filed her taxes claiming rental income on the property. I mean, what did she expect to happen? But then, that's the case with a lot of these corrupt politicians. They all become brazen, believing themselves to be untouchable. She faces up to 30 years in prison and $1 million in fines per count, as well as forfeiture. Fannie could also demand the lender repurchase the loan or cover losses. So all of that makes Letitia James this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-age children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now let's flabbergastificationate this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
So I did find one big problem with data centers. They seem to be vulnerable to fire. Okay, lots of things are, but the thing about data centers is a lot of people rely on them. And in this case, that's the government of South Korea, which they call the Republic of Korea, because who cares about the whole North-South thing, I guess. Wait, what do they call North Korea? Anyway, the National Information Resources Service at Haejeon houses about 858 terabytes worth of work files belonging to some 750,000 civil residents. The data center houses 96 information systems designated as critical to central government operations, including a system called G-Drive. At least it used to. G-Drive is a platform implemented to enable legal requirements in place since 2018, requiring all government officials to store documents in the cloud instead of on personal computers. Makes sense, right? I mean, if it's on their PCs, the files might get easily lost if something happens to the computer. So best to put it on our amazing data center, which provides around 30 gigabytes of storage per person. Except it was all lost in a fire, the G-Drive system being hit hardest. It began with the explosion of a lithium-ion battery, which was being mishandled in the course of doing scheduled maintenance on the site UPSs. That triggered a fire that burned for 22 hours, destroying 384 battery packs and an undisclosed number of servers. That's going to take a very long time and a lot of money to restore everything from backup. Well, actually, it's not. Because in the case of G Drive, there were no backups. Okay, that's not exactly true. There was a backup of the G Drive system. It was just in the same room as the servers. Yeah, it doesn't get much dumber than that. The Ministry of Personnel Management said, quote, "It's daunting, as 8 years' worth of work materials have completely disappeared." They had previously told people, quote, "All work materials should not be stored on Office PCs, but should be stored on the G Drive." Now, apparently, they're hoping people disobeyed them and had local copies of their files they could use to restore the system. Quote, "It's difficult to determine exactly what data has been lost. Employees are searching for work materials in Office PCs, emails, and official documents. We are also considering mobilizing professional recovery companies." Although the other 95 systems have backups in some form, the ministry said, quote, "The G Drive couldn't have a backup system due to its large capacity." Hello? Idiots! That's exactly when you do need backups! Among the lost records are internal meeting materials, National Assembly documents, personnel verification data, and even disciplinary records. Assemblyman Chandonhyao said, quote, "I believe negligence is ultimately the cause of the fire. Even basic investigations have not been conducted, and it has not been revealed whether manuals were followed." Yeah, but the real negligence is the lack of backups. Heads need to roll for this. They expect to be able to migrate the systems over to another data center and get back up and running in about 4 weeks, but the files are still going to be gone. I couldn't get figures on how much the data center cost taxpayers initially or how much it'll cost to get things back up and running, but the Korea Postal Service estimated the damage to small business owners could total 12.6 billion won, which is about $8.8 million. I guess along with don't roll your own crypto, we should probably have don't roll your own infrastructure. At least if you're so stupid you don't know you should do backups. I mean, I sort of get why they wouldn't trust a foreign company like Microsoft or Amazon, but are there no Korean tech companies up to the task? Samsung maybe? And if it's security you're worried about, I remind you of this thing called encryption. I don't know, back stuff up. That's really what this story's about. If you don't do backups, you're stupid. South Korea, you're stupid. So all of that makes South Korea this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this good stock, good battle, goodbye edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord, Patreon, or Subscribe Star, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Thomas Sowell. Much of the social history of the Western world over the past 3 decades has involved replacing what worked with what sounded good. The amazing thing is that this history of failure and disaster has neither discouraged the social engineers nor discredited them. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Bogosity.